So you're an atheist, okay? You claim to believe in nothing, but I would disagree. You actually believe in something.
Well, as far as being an atheist goes, I just simply don't believe in a God. But I'm guessing that you're going to rephrase this into me being, more than just an atheist, which I would agree. I am more than an atheist. I don't believe in nothing. I mean, I do have several beliefs, but as far as the atheist question or the question of whether or not God exists, I don't believe in a God. So I don't have that belief. I don't know why this is so hard for so many Christians to grasp, or why that really bothers so many Christians when people just simply don't believe in their particular God. Seems to make them quite uncomfortable. Well, today we're going to be hearing from 3 TikTok apologists about atheism in general and the God question overall. So if you want to fuck around and find out how bad the Christians are over on TikTok, then please stay tuned. What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Like I said, we're going to be going over 3 different TikTok apologists today, and first up is Matt McMillan of Matt McMillan Ministries. He obviously doesn't really like atheism, or at least doesn't like atheists that speak up on behalf of themselves or whatever. I don't know, but he's strawmanning atheism right out the gate here. Matt is claiming that we actually do believe in something, but if you're talking in a strictly atheist sense, we don't believe in God, and that's literally the only thing that atheism concerns. So I don't understand how you can say that we believe in something in that context. I mean, I guess you could twist it around and say that we believe in evidence, and whether or not that evidence can prove whether or not a God exists. And I think that if you have the evidence for God, then you should definitely present it, because evidence is ultimately what's going to convince me. But the problem is that people don't have evidence for God, or at least not sufficient enough evidence to prove without a shadow of a doubt that God does exist. And more importantly, the arguments against specific definitions of God are way stronger than the arguments for the specific definitions of God. So I'm technically gnostically atheist when it comes to any specific definition of God. But for the general God idea that most people seem to think that we're talking about, I am agnostic on that particular version of God, I guess. So let's get on into Matt's video.
Your something is nothing. You are saying that everything came from nothing. You are saying that science created everything.
That's not at all what we're saying. As far as the strict atheist context goes, we're just saying we don't believe your claim that a God does exist. We're definitely not saying that everything was created out of nothing. For one thing, that's a little bit of begging the question there. To suggest that it was created in the first place instead of it just came into existence, I feel like you're trying to lead your audience in the direction of admitting that there was a quote-unquote creator. So it would really behoove Matt here not to beg the question, because that's definitely not going to convince atheists. Also, coming right out the gate and saying atheists do believe in something, and that something is nothing, because you think that everything was created by nothing. Which is not what atheists believe, nor what they say. That's not even what science says. As far as the origins of the universe go, science has a hypothesis that states that the quantum scalar field, or a quantum scalar field, fluctuated from a false vacuum state into a true vacuum state. And when it did that, it released an immense amount of energy that we know as the Big Bang, or the expansion of the universe. This filled the universe with hot and dense energy that eventually started to cool down and atoms were able to form at that point. That's what the science says, but that has nothing to do with atheism. I mean, you could totally believe that God tipped that quantum scalar field and caused the universe to come into existence. I mean, I can't disprove you. There's no way that I can prove God didn't push that quantum scalar field over with his tiny little dick. But there's also no evidence to suggest that that happened. And more to the point, there's no evidence that suggests God does exist in the first place. So I don't see any reason for me to believe in a God. But anyways, I'll let Matt continue.
But even science will tell you that something can't come from nothing.
I don't know where he's getting this from. I'm going to need a citation. Citation fucking needed, Matt. But science doesn't say that everything came from nothing or that anything came from nothing. The nothing that typically creationists want to say is nothing is a hypothetical nothing. And it's not a nothing that actually exists, because we have found that when you remove everything from a section of space, create this vacuum where nothing exists, there is still some energy in that nothing. So it's not really nothing. There's still something there. That would be the scientific version of a quote unquote nothing. So I don't know if Matt has actually read up on the science, but he's just completely wrong about it.
You have an origins problem, my friend.
I don't think that I do. I think that the origins of this universe or life in general are perfectly explained with natural explanations. I don't think that I have to pull out a magical wizard in order for everything to be here, which is essentially what Christianity does. And don't give me that shit about how God's not a wizard. I'm sorry. If you didn't want me calling God a wizard, maybe you shouldn't have spent the last 1,000 or so years portraying God as a magical fucking wizard. Anyways, I digress. I'm not the one that's got to pull out special explanations and all this other shit in order to explain my worldview or in order to explain things without somebody's weird ass claim. All I have to do is look at nature and realize that there's nothing that says that God is required for nature to happen or to continue functioning normally as we have experienced it. Therefore, God is probably most likely not needed for nature. And because this universe and life and all of that has come about through natural events, seems like God is not needed.
You have some of the strongest faith on the planet because you believe in nothing. You believe that nothing is your creator.
No, I don't. And I wish Christians like Matt here would quit pushing these positions on atheists, because it's not that we believe in nothing or that nothing is our creator. We don't believe in a creator. Okay, so there's no way that we can think nothing is our creator. He is just doing this in order to be derogatory towards atheists and I guess a secular or atheist worldview, which atheism is not a worldview. Atheism would be one particular aspect of a larger worldview. I prefer to label that kind of worldview as more of a secular worldview, because a secular worldview just doesn't concern itself with magical wizards that create shit out of thin air.
This is all designed. This is all created.
Citation fucking needed, Matt.
Where did it come from?
Where did it come from? Just natural processes that occur in reality that have come to the point of life being here on Earth and me standing in front of a camera talking to it to post on a website called YouTube. This has all been because of natural processes. Now, don't take that as me saying that I think the camera that I'm recording with came about by natural processes, as if cameras just grow on trees or some shit. I could see somebody saying that, but that's not what I'm saying. Just like the camera has a natural explanation of humans developing it and creating it and producing it for people to buy and consume because we're a capitalist fucking society, doesn't mean that I think they grow on trees. What I mean is that there are natural processes that have gotten us to this point, and everything that's happened can be explained naturally.
Even the most intelligent atheistic scientist will tell you original matter had to have come from something outside of matter, outside of time.
What does that mean? Like, what does the term original matter mean? If matter cannot be created nor destroyed, as you know, the principle would tell us, what does it mean, like this phrase original matter? All of this is original matter. It's just in a different configuration than it was at the beginning of the universe. So it's all original. I don't know what he means by that. But anyways, I hold to the view that reality is this substrate that kind of permeates outside of our universe. Because, like, for instance, there's nothing that prevents other universes from existing, right? There's nothing that says this is the only universe, or that this is the first iteration of our own universe. There's nothing that says that our universe is the first and only universe to have ever existed. So this concept of reality, the laws and everything like that, that kind of govern things like on a quantum level or whatever, like all of that shit, I think extends outside of our universe. And so that, like, the very fabric of reality is where all of this came from. So if you're looking for something eternal, that would be reality. And I think that a lot of people with their religious ideas of God, they characterize reality as being God. And you can see this a lot with Christian apologetics. They always equate God with reality, but I really don't think that you can discern between God and reality, because they have just repackaged reality, this natural part of our experience, of our existence. They've repackaged it as being this personal and sentient God figure, when really it's just the natural form of existence, I guess, or something. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it. Obviously, I'm not a scientist nor an expert, but I feel like Christians and other religious people repackaging reality to be like God and giving it some kind of personhood perfectly explains some of the crazy shit they say.
Outside of space. So there is a God. You are proof that there is a God.
Well, no, I'm not proof that there is a God. Not at all. I don't get it when people say that. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to need a citation. Like, how do I prove that there's a God? I just don't understand that, because it's not like God snapped me into existence or something like that, you know? Like there was no magician that, you know, caused my mom to get pregnant or something. I don't know. You're going to need to provide some kind of evidence to suggest that human beings are proof that God exists. Unless you're saying that human beings created God and therefore God exists because we created him to explain shit that we just simply don't understand, then I totally agree in that sense. But I don't think that that's what he's talking about here. But I want you to notice that he says that matter had to come outside of space, or that wherever matter came from was outside of space. And I don't know what that means, because matter is just the physical shit that exists in reality, right? It's this table, it's this camera, like all of this is made out of, everything's made out of matter. If there was no space for the matter to exist in, then how could it have originated from outside of space? Oh, wait, he's saying that the magical wizard exists outside of space and he decided to create matter. Got it. He snapped his fingers. No, wait, in Christianity, it's not a snapping of the fingers or a twiggling of the nose. He spoke an incantation and created it. So he basically whispered a spell and created our universe, which provided the space for matter to exist within, right? That's what it says in the Bible. Am I wrong? God said, "Let there be light." And that was the magical incantation for light to appear. I don't know from where. It needs a source. Unless he's the source, then I guess he just opened his bathrobe? I'm not sure. But let's see if Matt gives us evidence as to how human beings prove that God exists. I'm gonna bet he doesn't.
Which one will you believe? I recommend Jesus because of grace.
Which one do you believe? And he recommends Jesus because of grace? Grace. In your religion, God created sin in order to guilt people into believing in him. And then he erased that sin by horrifically torturing and killing his quote unquote son, which actually turned out to be himself, who wasn't really dead because he resurrected 3 days later. And all of that changed God's opinion about sin. And everybody that accepts Jesus as dying on the cross for them is thereby absolved of sin. You're trying to tell me that God needed that kind of blood sacrifice? The blood sacrifice of his quote-unquote son that is actually him, it's like a carbon copy or whatever in the fuck. He basically did a copy-paste on Mary, and there he is. Like, he had to kill himself in order to erase his own sin? I don't know. I don't see how this is grace. That doesn't connect with me. Also, just because you claim all of this doesn't mean that all of this is true. You're going to need to provide some kind of evidence of sin, of God, of Jesus, and his quote-unquote sacrifice, which ultimately was just a 3-day sabbatical from this particular plane of existence. As far as the beliefs of Christians go, I don't think that there's multiple planes of existence, just saying. Well, that's it for Matt's video. Who's next?
You know what I find very ironic about the aggressive, angry atheists is that they constantly are like, just give me evidence, just give me evidence, I want evidence. And then you try to, and then they reject it and all this, and we play this little dance around and all that, but...
Oh, so it's Adam Rich, and he's definitely tired of having to provide evidence for the crazy fucking claims that he makes. Okay, then stop giving it? I don't know what to tell you. I mean, maybe he's complaining about the fact that we reject his shitty evidence. If that's the case, then get better fucking evidence there, Adam.
The thing is in my entire life, I have asked so many times, and I'm going to ask again right here, right now. If you're an atheist, you're so obsessed with evidence, and you attack and insult Christians for their belief because we can't provide the evidence you like, I challenge any atheist right now, ever, to anything you think could be evidence. Please provide evidence that God does not exist.
Well, you see, that's the thing. That's not how this shit works. I'm not making a positive claim. And most atheists out there don't make positive claims about the existence of God. We're just saying that we don't believe in a God. So it's incumbent upon the person or persons making the claim that God does exist to provide evidence. If you're not sitting there making the claim that, oh yeah, definitely God exists, and if you don't believe so, you're a fucking idiot, then most of the time we're just simply not going to care. Or if you're, just on Twitter or any other social media and you talk about how God is doing this, don't be surprised if you get somebody that asks you for the evidence of how you know that God is doing this. And when that fails to convince them, whatever evidence you give them fails to convince them, don't get mad because you couldn't convince them just because you gave them some shitty argument. Adam here wants us to prove a negative. And there are Gnostic atheists out there that would be more than willing to take him up on his offer of proving that a God does not and cannot exist. If Adam wants me to provide the evidence for why his particular God doesn't exist, I can more than do that because I am Gnostic on the God of Abraham, Yahweh, Elohim, whatever. I don't know. However you want to mention that particular God, the Abrahamic God, I can definitely prove that God doesn't exist. And that's just by using their own book against them. The Bible does not comport with reality. Hell, it doesn't even comport with history. A lot of the things in the Old Testament are not historical. The Gospels are not historical accounts of Jesus. And most of the New Testament is not a historical record of anything other than the beliefs of Christians, which does not necessarily mean that those beliefs are true. So considering that his own book of claims does not match up with what we perceive in reality or what we experience in reality, that means that God, as described by the Bible, does not exist. So there you go. Adam, I hope that suffices. Your God does not exist because the one claim to his existence doesn't comport with reality. It's that simple.
Because There are some very respectful atheists that just don't believe, and they're nice about it, and they're calm, and we're all good. I would never ask this of you. But you aggressive, insulting ones that clearly think that you have the key to all wisdom.
I mean, I don't think I got the key to all wisdom or nothing, but I mean, shit. I am kind of aggressive, as some people have said. So, I mean, if you do recall, I did make a Ray Comfort nearly vomit that one time. So, I mean, if there's another aggressive atheist out there, I'd love to meet him. Obviously, I don't think I'm the only aggressive atheist. And by aggressive, what Adam means here is that we just stand up and use our voice. I implore everybody that watches my content, whether you're atheist or a Christian or theist in general, I definitely want you to stand up and use your voice.
You think that God doesn't exist. You're so obsessed with evidence. Please provide me evidence that God does not exist. I can't wait to hear it.
Well, Adam, I've given you that evidence. And of course, this video has been on your TikTok for a while now. So I'm guessing you really haven't gotten anything that's convinced you that we can prove that your particular version of God doesn't exist. But if Adam is looking for like evidence of just God in general not existing, he's probably not going to get very convincing arguments, or at least I don't find the Gnostic position of atheism to be all that convincing, just because I feel like there's too much unknown shit to be able to say, oh, he definitely doesn't exist, or a deity rather definitely doesn't exist, some entity that exists outside of our universe, and not within any one universe or anything like that. Like, I don't know what's possible. I do know right now, given our evidence, that it doesn't seem likely. And so that's why I don't believe in that particular deity. But there's no way that I can say that it definitely doesn't exist. I can say that it more than likely doesn't exist. And if it does exist, we'll probably never know that he does, which is the agnostic position. And I proudly take that position. Well, that's it for Adam. Thank fucking Christ. Now let's get to our very last guy. He's gonna hit on the mathematical shit a little bit here for his proof that God definitely exists.
It is a fact that it is impossible to prove or disprove the existence of God.
Oh shit. Okay, so this video is not about proving that God exists. I wonder what it's about then. I mean, I do think that it's impossible to disprove that a God could exist. So that's why I remain agnostic, like I had just stated with Adam. I remain agnostic on it because I don't think there's really a solid way to surefire say that a deity doesn't exist. But if you're talking about a specific definition of God, like I also said before with Adam's video, I can definitely prove whether or not that God exists. So I feel like there's a little bit too much nuance that's not being addressed at this initial point, but maybe he goes on to explain.
I'm going to use science and math to hint towards the existence of God. So behind me is proteins. Proteins and DNA are essential for human life. They are what make us our own unique individuals.
Well, I mean, it is essential to human life, but I mean, those things are essential to life in general. Not all kinds of life, but the life that we have here on this planet, those things would be important. So I think, specifically stating human life is, I don't know. I feel like that kind of already shows your cards a little bit, because you're trying to suggest that human beings prove that God exists. Maybe this is what Matt was referring to before in the first video. Nice little callback there that I didn't exactly plan, because Matt initially said, hey, you are proof that God exists. So maybe this guy's going to solidly show that we are definitely proof that God exists. All right. Way to end this little foray into TikTok Christianity.
Chances of proteins forming unnaturally and on accident are 1 in 10 to the 164th power.
I get it. Yeah, that seems like a large amount. But if you consider the amount of chemical reactions that have happened since chemical reactions started taking place, which would have been the very, beginning of the universe. Okay. So we could go about 300,000 years after the expansion of the universe. We can go there because that's when atoms started to form and all this other stuff. And then chemical reactions would have started happening then. So if you consider the amount of let's not even go back that far. Let's just start with, the Earth, whenever that started to form. Of course, that's not to say that Earth is the only place that life has arisen. We don't know if life has arisen elsewhere, but more than likely it definitely has. So let's just take the Earth. If you take the amount of chemical reactions that were happening like every single day or second or however you want to measure that, if you just consider the amount of chemical reactions that were happening, this 1 or 10 to the 164 whatever probability doesn't seem all that big, considering the fact that it's being used in a very, very large set, like much larger than 10 to the 164th or whatever in the fuck.
Just so you know how big that number is, that's 1 followed by 164 zeros. And the law of probability, which could also be called Borel's law, states that any odds beyond 1 in 10 to the 50th power have zero chance of happening.
Well, yeah, so that's in our normal experience. Like with anything above that point in our normal experience is more than likely not going to happen because it's a very small probability. But the fact is, the probability is not zero. And this is one thing that a lot of people get wrong about probabilities, is that probabilities, as far as whether or not something's going to happen or the likelihood of something happening in a given time period, it largely depends on how many instances are there, how many events occur in which for that event to happen. And when you consider that with the, building blocks of life starting to form and all this other stuff, you'll find that it's a very good chance that it'll happen given the appropriate circumstances. And that's what we find here on Earth. We found that the circumstances in the early Earth were just right for amino acids to begin to form. We've actually been able to replicate this somewhat in the lab setting. The Miller-Urey experiment actually had amino acids form naturally given a certain set of conditions. And since they can form naturally, that means that this probability of them forming that way is actually very likely given the correct conditions.
The estimated number of total atoms in the universe is 1 in 10 to the 72nd power, which according to these laws mathematically proves that the proteins and DNA that make up this universe were not created on accident or by chance.
Well, not created by accident or chance. I think that definitely by chance, as far as amino acids go, it was totally by chance. But in a successive series of things that led to the conditions for amino acids to arise. And once amino acids started to form, it was more likely for them to continue to form. And he's trying to suggest that the number of atoms in the universe somehow proved that everything was created. Like, there's a low probability of this number of atoms existing, therefore, God! Again, it all depends on the set in which you are working. And the set that we are working with here provides for an innumerable amount of chemical reactions and an innumerable amount of instances for things to occur in the specific ways that would be required for life to happen. So, as you can tell, this giant number, this argument from big or small numbers, really kind of falls flat when you consider the full context of what we're talking about.
Before you take my word for it, here's a list of scientists that back this up, and here's their probability of all this happening by chance.
So, I have to call bullshit on this, because, for one thing, that list includes Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan did not believe that this world had to be created in order for it to be here. I mean, he may have come up with the number that he suggests here, but it really doesn't matter what numbers that these people have come up with, because when we're talking about the vastness of this universe and how big it is, it's fairly obvious that the 10 to the 164th or 9th or whatever number that he gave before, or any of these numbers right here, they seem to make it very likely that it will happen. You'll also notice that these guys never attribute it to zero. Like, they never say that there's a 0 chance that this would happen. Life happening or naturally arising, or this universe naturally arising on its own. They don't say that there's a 0% chance. I'm guessing because that's a theological kind of position right there, not really mathematical. In this particular situation, you never choose 0%. But just because they're very low probabilities doesn't mean they will never happen. They're just very unlikely to happen. And that's the important point to take away from this, is that it's very unlikely that life would arise on any planet. And that's still true. It's very unlikely that our planet would support life, but we can be 100% certain that this planet does support life because we're fucking here, and we can be fairly certain that this has happened in the trillions upon trillions of planets that definitely exist out there. I mean, there are trillions of planets in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and there are right around 2 trillion galaxies that exist, more than likely. You think that we're so uber special that we're the only planet that supports life? When you consider these numbers, the numbers on the screen here, while they seem small, that means that it definitely will happen, but it just won't happen often. That's what these numbers say.
Which all happen to be greater than 1 in 10 to the 50th power. Meaning, again, if it surpasses that number, it is impossible of happening by chance.
So he's using this 10 to the 50 number out of context. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of his video, that this 10 to the 50 number only applies to our normal experiences that we have in our lifetimes. Are we going to experience life arising on another planet within our lifetime? Maybe not. But whenever life does arise on another planet, we're probably not going to know. But let's just say that we do know that life has arisen on another planet. It will happen in somebody's lifetime. It's not that it will never happen in somebody's lifetime. It will happen in somebody's lifetime. It's just whether or not it's your lifetime. And you can bet that it's probably not going to be your lifetime, but you don't know that for sure. So he has to rip his whole 10 to the 50 number for counting it as 0% out of the original context that it was mentioned in order to make this argument.
It is almost mathematically and statistically proven that God exists. For you people who believe in science but not God, you contradict yourself.
No. We're not contradicting ourselves. We just understand how probability works. And it's painfully obvious that you need to take some classes on statistics and probability. I mean, I wasn't the best student, but I definitely passed the class with at least a B. I'm fairly certain it was a B. Anyways, my point is that you need to take a statistics and probability class, and you will quickly find out how it depends on how large of a set you're working with. If you're talking about an uber small set, then yeah, those numbers mean that you will probably never have that happen. If you have a video game that has any of those numbers with the likelihood that some special item were to appear for you, then that means that it's likely not going to happen. But when we're talking about the universe and the vast amount of planets out there, the trillions and trillions of planets that exist out there, with those numbers, will life arise on another planet other than ours? Most definitely, because that probability is not 0. Well, I spend a lot of time over there on TikTok. If you want to follow me on TikTok, just go to TikTok, Godless Engineer. You'll find me on there. I post on there sporadically, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes not at all. But you can find me on TikTok if you want to connect up with me there. I'm also on Twitter and other social media, so definitely come and check me out. But hey, I'd love to hear what you guys think about these 3 TikTokers. Do you think any of them had good opinions about these things or no? Let me know down below in the comments. And hey, while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.